Hey, welcome back everybody. We're going to check in here on our Hail Pale Ale that we brewed about 36 hours ago. We pitched the yeast. I've been keeping an eye on the airlock and I can see it's bubbling away. So we know we got active primary fermentation happening. Now, I told you we're going to dry hop this beer. So our little dry hop tube that we use in our boil, we cleaned it out really good. I even ran it through the dishwasher to make sure it's nice and clean. And then I took this and I soaked it in sanitizer because everything that's going to be touching our beer after it's boiled needs to be clean and sanitized. So we sanitized it, had it sitting here on a paper towel just to kind of let it dry off a little bit. We got an ounce of Citra and an ounce of Amarillo that we are going to dry hop with. So we're going to take these hops and put it in our tube and we are going to dry hop in primary fermentation. Now, years ago, dry hopping was always something that you did in secondary. There was a lot of brewers believed that you didn't want the yeast and the hops mixing together, I guess working against each other. But in the past, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, especially during that kind of the New England IPA phase, that's been going on. A lot of brewers started dry hopping in primary fermentation because the way the yeast and the hops interact together, they create these pretty amazing citrusy, juicy hop aromas and flavors. So I've adopted that strategy whenever I make IPAs or pale ales. So I love to do that as well. So I love dry hopping in primary fermentation, and I let the hops sit in there for only about 3 days. 2 to 3 days is plenty whenever you're dry hopping. You don't need to leave dry hops in there for a week or 2 weeks, okay? The only thing that will do is cause some of that vegetation off flavor if you leave your hops in too long. 2 to 3 days is plenty. The hops will be completely broken down and dissolved. All of the aroma and flavor that are gonna go into the beer will be done by then. So in about 2 or 3 days, we're gonna pry the lid back off and we're gonna pull these hops out. And if there's still more fermentation that needs to happen, we'll let it go until it's done. Taking our gravity readings, we're shooting for a final gravity of about 1010 or 1012, which will give us our nice 5.5% beer. So we're gonna carefully take the lid off the bucket, okay? Just not the whole entire lid. We're gonna pry it open just enough to get this in. I have a little fishing line here on my tube that we're gonna put in, and we're gonna let this hang out the outside, which will make it easier for when we have to take them out later. So I'm gonna spin the bucket here. I got this handy dandy little tool that I use when I ferment in buckets. Just saves your fingernails a little bit. So we're gonna put this on. We're gonna pry this up just enough to open it up, and I can see inside. Holy cow, primary fermentation is definitely happening. Now, we are exposing a little bit of oxygen to the beer right now by putting these dry hops in, but I mean, we only had that open for 10 seconds, so there is plenty, and you can see the airlock going crazy because we just added in a new ingredient and we had it open. Whenever you're creating pressure, that as the yeast is fermenting, it's pumping off all the CO2. So I know you couldn't see it, but there was a huge krausen that was already forming from that primary fermentation. So I can definitely tell because the airlock is bubbling, but when I saw inside there, it was foaming up and it was pretty active. If this was a clear fermentation vessel, you would see that yeast just rolling around. Back when I first started brewing, I used glass carboys because I love to watch that active fermentation, but glass carboys are kind of a pain they're heavy, they're hard to move around, they can break and crack, and they're a pain to clean because you have just a tiny little opening at the top. When you use a bucket or a big mouth fermenter, especially when you're dry hopping, it makes it so much easier. So we're gonna leave these dry hops in for 2 to 3 days, and we're gonna come back. We're gonna obviously keep an eye on our airlock. If our airlock is still really bubbling, we know that fermentation won't be done yet, but we're gonna pry this open. We're gonna take those hops out, put the lid back on. Maybe we'll quick grab a sample too to take a gravity reading. And if our gravity reading is still in the 20s, we know we still have some time, some sugars left in there that the yeast needs to ferment. But if it's down at 1010 or 1012, even after the dry hop is done. Then we'll be ready to transfer it into a secondary fermenter where we're gonna add in some gelatin findings as well as cold crash it to clear out, to clump up all those proteins, to drop all of that junk out of it and to clear it out so it looks like a crisp, clear, commercial styled beer. All right, Wolverine Nation, go blue, hail pale ale. We'll see you back in a few days. Hey, welcome back, guys. We are ready to take a final gravity reading on our hail pale ale to see if it's fully attenuated and has reached our final gravity. We're shooting for 1012 for our final gravity for this pale ale. We started at 1060, so we started on a little bit of a higher note than the recipe was shooting for 1054 to drop down to 1012 to give us that 5.5% beer. But we started a little high at 1060, which is fine. I think that had a little bit to do with the liquid malt extract, different than our all grain recipe, but we're going to take a look at it. We're going to take a gravity reading. Hopefully we're down at that 1012, 1014 range, maybe 1010. That'll definitely tell us if we're fully attenuated. Last time we added in 2 ounces of dry hops, 1 ounce of Citra and 1 ounce of Amarillo. We added that in 48 hours into primary fermentation, so we had a good fermentation going. We added those hops in. I let them sit for 3 days and then I pulled them out. Whenever you dry hop, you don't need to leave the hops in for more than 3 days. The old thinking was the longer you leave the hops in, the more bitterness and aroma, not bitterness, because we're dry hopping, the more aroma and flavor you would get out of them. But the longer you leave those in, especially if you go past a week, then you're risking having that vegetal flavor from the actual hops as it breaks down in your beer. So again, I leave them in for 3 days. I pull them out. When I pulled them out, the airlock was still bubbling away. I still saw a lot of active fermentation going on in the bucket. So I knew that I still had a ways to go yet with fermentation. So I let it sit for another week. So this one went a little bit longer than what it normally does, but maybe that had something to do with the dry hops as well. But as you can see, the airlock is completely still. This has been now fermenting for over 10 days. So I think we're good to go with taking a gravity reading. So let's take our airlock off here. We'll set this off to the side because we can use that airlock again when we transfer, if we are going to transfer here today. So we're going to peel this lid off. All right, yes, and all of that foam from that active fermentation is gone. You can't see inside this. Maybe I'll come over and show you. But there's a good 1.5 to 2 inch kreuzen on top, which shows that the yeast was fermenting quite well. And the top of the beer is pretty still and clear. It is a little bit darker color, like I said, when we were brewing the beer from that liquid malt extract. So I'm interested to see what it looks like after we clarify it and then put it in a keg to serve it. I was already assuming it was going to be a little darker than normal, but I got my sanitized thief here. I'm going to gently put this in and shake it up and down again. At this point, we don't want to stir it around a lot. We don't want to cause a lot of extra bubbles and oxygen into that. But look at that color. Yeah, you can tell in that color. Now, again, too, this is in a tube in my thief here, so it always looks a little darker than what the final color looks like. You'll see, too, when we put it in our secondary fermenter in our clear glass carboy here, that it's going to look a little darker as well. So I'm going to fill that up there to the top. We're going to set that down and try not to make a mess here. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to give it a spin. I want that hydrometer right in the middle. I'm going to quickly set this over here in my sink. All right, and as you can see, well, you probably can't see because you're far away, but we are spinning here in the green zone, which green is always a good sign, especially when you're making an IPA pale ale. You want it to finish a little bit on the drier note. I can see the number 10, and it is 1 notch below that, so we count by 2, so it is 1012, exactly. I'm going to pause this a second and do a close-up so you can see as well. So there's a close-up of our final gravity at 1012. And we're going to zoom out here, and I want to show you the inside of our fermentation bucket. As you can tell, look at that krausen. So you definitely tell there's some good active fermentation going on there. And you can tell by the top that most of the fermentation is done. It's pretty still. You can see a couple tiny bubbles coming up. That's just a tiny, tiny bit of CO2 being released yet by those few remaining soldiers of yeast cells down there, still fermenting. But we can call this good at 1012. So the final numbers on this beer, the original gravity was 1060. It was supposed to be 1054 and then finish at 1012, which would have gave us exactly 5.5% ABV, alcohol by volume. But since we were a few points high on the original gravity at 1060 and it finished at 1012, we are exactly at 6.3% alcohol by volume. It's going to be a little bit stronger than originally planned, but again, do you know anybody that's going to complain about having a little bit more alcohol in their beer, especially when you're tailgating at the big house? I don't think so. Anywho, nobody's going to even notice the difference in the flavor either. There's no palate out there that can discern between a 5.5 and a 6.3% beer. Before we transfer that beer into secondary fermentation, what we're going to do is we're going to clarify this beer. Okay? I do this with every beer I make, whether it's a lager, a pilsner, a pale ale, an IPA, even my stouts and porters and browns and ambers. I clarify every beer I make except, obviously, my hazy IPAs and my wheat beers. My American wheat beers, I like to keep a little bit of haze in those as well. But this IPA, we want it to look like it got freshly poured straight out of a brewery when we serve it. So we're going to clarify it. There's two ways to clarify it, and I'm going to actually do both of them. Number one, we're going to add in some gelatin findings into the beer when we rack it into secondary fermentation. And I'm going to show you my little tip and trick on how to do this very easily right here in your kitchen. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to cold crash it. We're going to take it when it's all transferred, and we're going to bring it downstairs into our beer fridge at 38 degrees, and we're going to let it sit for 48 hours. Any leftover material or proteins that are in that beer, the gelatin findings are going to help kind of clump and coagulate those up. I don't think coagulate's the right word, but solidify those, and it's going to drop out with the cold temperatures down to the bottom of the fermenter, and then we'll rack all the clean beer off the top into our keg that we're going to bring to the big house to serve out of our cold break cold one. Remember, we made a double batch, so we're going to fill up 2 of those little 2-gallon Sankey kegs. So we made 5 gallons of beer. We're going to put 4 gallons of it into kegs, and if we have a gallon left over, we're going to not throw that away. We're also going to carbonate that and then probably can it up so we have some cans to go as well. So let's talk about gelatin findings. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some Knox unflavored gelatin. You can buy this right at the grocery store. I usually buy a big box of it because it comes in these packets. Okay, and these packets go a long way. I think you only need like a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons for a 5-gallon batch of beer. I buy a big box and it lasts me for a long time. The other thing you can do is, I took the label off of this, but they also sell this at the store in a canister. It's almost like the Country Time lemonade or the Kool-Aid. This is Knox unflavored gelatin as well. You can buy it like this too. So if you want to use a teaspoon and scoop it out and measure it, you can do it that way too. But today we're going to use our packets. As a matter of fact, I have a half a packet left over from a previous beer that I clarified. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a measuring cup and you're going to use 1 cup of cold tap water. So you want the water as cold as you can coming off your tap. It doesn't necessarily need to be ice cold. Just use as cold water as you can get off your tap. So we're going to put 1 cup of this water in our measuring cup, like so. And then we are going to take our gelatin and we are going to sprinkle it across the entire surface area of that water. And the first step to this is what they're going to let the gelatin bloom. So when the gelatin is blooming, when it's sitting on the top of that water, as I'm fumbling with this packet as I'm trying to talk here too, I had it sealed up really good. I'm just going to rip a new opening into it. That bloom, what it's going to look like, it's going to all kind of start to gelatinize. Is that a word? I always kind of compare it to like like a jellyfish in the ocean. We're going to sprinkle this along the top. And again, you can measure a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons out, but as long as you're kind of covering the entire surface area of the water, okay, you've got enough gelatin there. Okay, so as you can see, it's just resting on top right now. We're going to let this sit for 15 minutes. So we're just going to set this off to the side. We're going to let it sit for 15 minutes in those cold water. And what's going to happen is it's going to bloom. So it's going to kind of, again, coagulate. I don't know why that word stuck in my head. And it's going to turn into this like kind of like gooey jellyfish type mess. When it looks like that, and I'll show you here in a second when it's to that step, then what we're going to do is we're going to flash heat it in the microwave for little 15-second burst. We're going to hit it for 15 seconds, stir it up, hit it for 15 seconds, stir it up. Do it 3 or 4 times until that gelatin is completely dissolved and crystal clear. We don't want to overheat it because then we're cooking it. We don't want gelatin clumps and things like that in the beer. We just want it to dissolve completely into that water, and then we're going to add that water into the fermenter and then transfer the beer on top of it. And when we do that, it's all going to mix in with the beer. Now, 1 cup of gelatinized water in 5 gallons of beer, you're not even going to notice. But what it's going to do, you'll notice the clarity that you will get off your beer. There will be no haze. So we're doing actually 3 clarifying steps. During the boil, we added a Whirlfloc tablet with 15 minutes to go in the boil. That helps some of that pectin, haze, and clarity during the boil. Then after, in secondary, we're adding gelatin findings, which are going to clump together any remaining proteins and things. And then we're going to drop the temperature down to 37, 38 degrees, which is going to drop any material left all the way to the bottom. And all we're going to be left with is crystal clean, commercial looking beer. So let's let this bloom, and then we'll come back and we'll flash heat it. So this is what I'm talking about when I was saying let the gelatin bloom. As you can see, we just sprinkled it on top, but it has formed that kind of gelatinous jellyfish type blob at the top after about 15 minutes in that cold water. That's telling me now we are ready to start the flash heating in the microwave. So let's head on over to the microwave and get this all dissolved in. Okay, so we just saw that up close view of the gelatin as it bloomed. It's ready to go now. So we got our little whisk here. We got our microwave. We're gonna do a little flash heating in short little bursts for 15 seconds. So just put it in your microwave, 15 seconds, let it go. We're heating it up so it will dissolve in clearly and evenly throughout, but we're trying not to cook it. We don't want to heat it up so that the water starts boiling and that gelatin actually cooks. So that's why we do little 15-second bursts. 15 seconds, take it out. As you can see, look at that. It's still hazy, but a lot of that bloom has already dissipated. So give it a little stir, put it back in, 15 seconds more. And we're going to do this 3 to 4 times. We're looking for a crystal clear liquid to tell us that the gelatin is 100% dissolved in. But again, we're staying away from overheating it. So there's our second 15-second burst, and it's looking good. Still a little cloudy. So we know that there's still some gelatin findings in there. I think maybe 1 more of these might do it. Let's try 15 seconds more and take a look. Yikes. Take a look at what it looks like. Wow. That was a sign from the cold break gods right there. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. Boyd will tell you it's a good sign, but I got to be careful how hard I close the microwave, because we don't want that to happen again. Ooh, look at that. Beautiful. I'm not even going to stir this, but look at that. Look at how nice and clean and clear that is. We are ready to go. So that's what you're looking for. So I did 3 15-second bursts, and that is all dissolved in. We're going to take this and we're going to put it in the bottom of our secondary fermenter first, and then we're going to transfer our beer right on top of this gelatin mixture, and it's going to evenly mix in with our beer. So let's go over and do that. All right, as you can see, we got our secondary fermenter here. We got our good old glass carboy. I don't use these very often anymore, but I want to use this for this video because as we're cold crashing and we're clarifying this beer, I want you to be able to see how clean and clear it's going to get from primary fermentation into secondary fermentation. Now, there's a school of thought of this is some people don't even go from primary to secondary. They take it straight from primary and they go right into a bottling bucket if they're going to bottle or can it, or they put it right into their keg because your keg is going to go in your kegerator, which is going to be 37, 38 degrees. Or if you're bringing it, to a party and you're putting it in one of the cold break cold ones, you're going to be packing that cooler full of ice and it's going to get really cold. That being said, what's ever in that keg will drop to the bottom, and maybe your first or second pour might pull some of that material up from the bottom of the keg. This is an extra step, I know. It's what I've always done, and it's my method. So if this method works for you, great. If you want to skip a step, feel free to as well. But we're going to take our gelatin. We're going to carefully add this to the fermenter first because we want to rack that beer right in and have it mix in. Now, if you forget, which I've done before, I forgot to add my gelatin in. I racked the beer in first, and I was like, oh man, I want to clarify with gelatin. You can always add it in after the beer is already in here and just very gently swirl it around. It works that way too. So don't fret if you skip that step, but I always like to pour it in first. We got our sanitized siphon here. This is the step where we're going to be careful. We don't want to add any extra splashing or bubbles because those bubbles mean oxygen. We're going to use good old gravity here, and we're going to set our siphon right up. We're not going to put it all the way down to the bottom because I know that's where that yeast cake is, and I'm trying to stay away from that. I don't want any extra material in here, unnecessary extra material. So we're going to give it a couple gentle pumps here, and as you can see, we got gravity working. It's swirling down. We got our hose on the bottom, so it's gently circulating. It's mixing in with all of that gelatin. And as you can see too, it's more of a little bit darker of a caramely color. If I had to go back and do this again, what I probably would have done is I wouldn't have put that caramel 60 grain, steeping grains at the beginning of our brew day. I did a half a pound of caramel 60, and that caramel 60 grain gives it a little bit extra color as well. But we didn't need that extra color because we had it in our extract. I do that when I make my all grain version because I want a little extra character and color into it. But we didn't need it for this because that liquid malt extract already had a lot of color in it. So it's going to be a little bit darker than a typical pale ale. But let's give it a taste because we got our sample here from where we took our gravity reading. And Citra and Amarillo are my absolute two favorite hops. Like I said, you can use any hops your heart desires. Some people are in love with Mosaic and Simcoe. You know who you are. Good hops, but Citra and Amarillo. Citra is such a great citrus, piney IPA pale ale hop. Amarillo is in that medium alpha acid range, like 8.5 to 9 alpha acid percent. So you get the bitterness with it, but you get a lot of flavor with it too. I love dry hopping with Amarillo. You'll see a lot of just Citra IPAs and Amarillo IPAs as well. So you know it's a good hop. So let's give it a taste. Oh man, that's awesome. Now obviously it's going to taste a little different because it's not carbonated yet. So when you add that CO2 to it and you carbonate it, it's going to bring out even more body and mouthfeel to the beer. But the 2 ounces of dry hop in this too are just bursting. Like I said, if you haven't yet, try dry hopping during primary fermentation. It's not a competition between the yeast and the hops. I don't know how it works, the science behind it, but when the yeast is actively fermenting and you're adding in those hops, those dry hops at the same time, it creates this like citrus bomb of aroma and flavor. And this is borderline IPA. We're looking at 45 IBUs, but man, this is so crushable. Like you're going to be able to drink multiple pints of this beer. Now this one is 6.3%. So Want to be a little careful, but I know this is going to go over well. This is going to be a hit at our tailgate. So we're going to let this swirl in and finish transferring. And then I'm going to show you one other little trick that I do to make sure, because we are introducing oxygen during this stage. Obviously, there's oxygen in the air. We got an open container here, open container here as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to put a blanket of CO2 over it to push all that oxygen out while we cold crash it. So let's let this finish up doing its work, and then I'll show you my little CO2 trick. Okay, our transfer is done. As you can see, here is the primary fermentation vessel. We got that krausen around the top that I was telling you about, and there's the spent yeast in the bottom. So when we rack that beer, we were very, very careful to keep the siphon, a 1/4 of an inch or so above that, because we're leaving all that gunk behind. If you are racking from primary fermentation straight into a keg, you definitely want to be careful that you're not pulling any of that yeast and having that in your beer. But this is what we got going for us now. Now, as you can see, look at that color. You're probably saying, Morin G, there is nothing pale at all about this ale. But if you know anything about glass carboys, they always look darker than what they actually are. All right, so that's it. We added our gelatin into the bottom of this. We racked the beer from primary fermentation vessel into secondary fermentation vessel. As you can see, it is not looking a lot like a pale ale. It's kind of looking like a light brown ale or an amber ale. But if you know anything about these carboys, they always look darker than what they actually are. So after we clarify this beer and we keg it and we carbonate it in the keg, you'll see a drastic difference when we're serving it into a pint glass or into a plastic cup. The color will be lighter than this. Now, it's still going to be darker than our all grain version because of the extract that we use, but it's still going to be amazing. See what I did there? Amazing flavor, amazing aroma, and a great beer to tailgate with. So we added a little bit of oxygen. We introduced some oxygen as we had this open fermentation into this open secondary fermenter. So as you can see, I got my little 5-pound carbon dioxide CO2 tank that I use to carbonate my beers. I force carbonate all my beers. Long gone are the days where I bottle condition anything with priming sugar. Maybe you're still at that stage, and that's totally fine. But if you can move up to kegging with forced carbing, your life will be a million times easier, and you will be drinking your beer a lot faster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little blanket of carbon dioxide on the top of this carboy. So I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to hit it with the CO2, and I'm going to quick take the airlock, put that on, the bung and the airlock. So what I just did, obviously, CO2 is heavier. It's a heavier gas than oxygen. So that little bit of oxygen that was sitting on the top of our carboy here, what I did is when I hit it with the CO2 is heavier. It sinks down and creates a blanket over the top of this beer, and it pushes all the oxygen up and out. So any oxygen that I had in here on that beer for the 5 or 10 minutes that it was exposed is now out. It's not going to seep in and soak into the beer. That layer of carbon dioxide is creating a blanket on the top, protecting the beer. And now I got my bung in there with my airlock, so everything is clean, safe, sanitized, and ready to go down into the beer fridge. So it's already looking 1,000,000% better than what it looked like in primary. But as the gelatin starts to work, and as we drop the temperature down to 37 degrees in our beer fridge, this is going to clarify and look gorgeous. We're going to see a film down here at the bottom, not quite like the yeast cake from the primary fermenter, but you're going to see some leftover proteins and whatever material is left in here. The gelatin and the cold crashing temperatures are going to drop that out, and then we're going to transfer one more time from our secondary fermenter into our two-gallon Sankey kegs that we're going to be serving out of our cold one. So we are getting so close to our final destination. We're going to let this cold crash for 48 hours. 2 days. It's going to do its job. Then we're going to transfer it into our kegs. We're going to force carbonate our kegs, which will only take another 2 days maybe. And then we'll be ready to be partying in Ann Arbor, cheering on the Wolverines, and drinking this amazing Hail Pale Ale. Hey there, everybody. We are only a few days from our big tailgate day at the Big House this coming Saturday. So we got to get this cold crashed, clean, clear, amazing Hail Pale Ale into these 2-gallon Sankey kegs so we can get them carbonated and ready for crushing time on the golf course at the Big House. As you can see, we added our gelatin. We cold crashed it, just brought it up out of the beer fridge. Down here at the bottom, I know it's hard to see from where you're at. I'll zoom in here in a little bit, but we got a lot of extra proteins and everything that fell out of the beer. We still have a pretty dark caramel colored beer. Again, I told you it always looks darker in the carboy. When we put it in the kegs, we carbonate it and we have it on draft. It'll look a little bit lighter in the glass when we're drinking it on Saturday. But the smell is good, the taste is good, and even after over a decade of home brewing, I learned something new because I don't typically brew with extract on my stove. I usually use all grain. I choose my grains carefully. I choose lighter grains, and I brew those in a bigger batch. So this is my first time brewing an extract batch of this beer, and I learned that I didn't need to add those extra caramel 60 grains in because the extract was already, had plenty of color. It was already pretty dark. So we are going to take this off. We've got our 2-gallon Sankey kegs. So what we're going to do here first is we're going to release the CO2 that is inside the kegs. If you do keg, or if you're just about to start kegging, you should always keep your empty, clean, sanitized kegs filled with CO2. Okay? That'll keep the pressure good inside of them. That CO2 forms that nice heavy layer because it's heavier than oxygen. So even after I open this up, when I'm transferring the beer in there, there's still a blanket of CO2 sitting inside the bottom of this keg. So we're going to take the spear out here, and that CO2 will stay in there for a little bit. We're going to use a little bit of gravity here to transfer this in, and we got our sanitized siphon here. We're going to just put this little airlock and bung off to the side. Now, we can make this go a lot faster if we set the Sankey keg down on the floor maybe to get a little bit more gravity on it. But for video purposes, we're going to do it right up here. Now, when you put your siphon in, don't put it all the way down to the bottom. If you do that, you're going to get all of that stuff that came out. So here we go. As you can see, like this looks pretty dark, but right here in the line when I'm looking at it, it's a golden yellow color. So it is a lot lighter than what you're seeing here in the glass. So I'm going to let this siphon in. I'm going to grab the camera here and I'm going to do a couple little close-ups so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so here we go. A little close-up here on the carboy. We're going to go down to the bottom. As you can see, there is what's ever left of that yeast cake, those dormant yeast cells. What you can do as a brewer is you can rinse and clean that used yeast, and then you can reuse it again in another brew day. I don't do that just because the dry yeast packs are only about $4 or $5 each. And it's a lot of extra work to do that, but I know if you're brewing often or if you want to save some money, you can do that. I know big breweries do that often. They have a house yeast strain where they clean and wash their yeast and they reuse it over and over again. So remember how dark that looks there in the carboy because it's all kind of condensed? Here is what it's looking like as it's coming out of the siphon. What a dramatically different lighter color. It's still darker than what I want it to be, but it is not amber brown color like it looks there. We got a nice golden yellow color, and this is what it's going to look like when it's carbonated and it's coming out into our glasses when we're drinking it on the golf course. So we're going to let this finish up. We're going to fill up 2-gallon Sankey kegs for a total of 4 gallons. We're going to have a little left over, and then we're going to put that in a separate little mini keg and keep that at home on tap so that we can have some Hail Pale Ale and maybe even throw some in some cans with our special label on it to share with other people. Looks like we're just about full. We're going to pull this up to stop the transfer. I'm going to get just a couple bubbles here. But again, the nice thing about these kegs is they have an off-gas valve on them. So when we hook it up, we already had a blanket of CO2 in the bottom of the keg. And when we hook it up to our CO2 down in the basement on our kegerator to carbonate it, we're going to purge any oxygen, any little bit of oxygen that is left on top of here we're going to purge that oxygen off when we hook up our CO2 by using that valve. So let's do this. Let's open up our second one here. We're going to off-gas that CO2. I'm going to do that before we open up our spear here. So I'm going to turn this. I'm going to get this guy out. And then we're going to take, so we don't make a mess, take our siphon hose and put it right in that one. And then we are going to put our spear back in our finished spear and tighten that down. We'll take this down, we'll hook it up, and off-gas that. It'll probably only take 24 to 36 hours, maybe. We're going to give it, we're 3 days away from game day, so we're going to give it up to 72 hours just to be safe. But 48 hours is plenty in these small little 2-gallon Sankey kegs. We'll turn our PSI probably up to about 15 to 20, and when we serve our beer, we'll serve it at about 12 PSI out of our cold break cold one. All right, so we're going to start siphoning this one in next to fill that up, and then we'll see how much we have left over at the end. All right, we are almost to the top. We got to leave a little headspace for that spear to get in there. So we're going to slowly take this out. As you can see, we got maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of a gallon to a gallon left. We're going to keep that because we're going to put that in a small little mini keg because we can carbonate that and we can get, I don't know, 8 to 10 cans of beer out of that. So we're definitely not going to throw that away. All right, take this out. We'll set this off to the side here. And we're going to put our spear on. I'm going to tighten this down. And we are done. The only thing left is the drinking and the partying. The reason why we do this hobby in the first place. Yes, it's fun creating recipes. Yes, it's fun brewing. It's a lot of work, but the end goal is drinking and sharing our hard work with our friends. We got two 2-gallon Sankey kegs of a 6.3% Hail Pale Ale, about 45 IBUs, brewed specifically with Citra and Amarillo hops and dry hopped with those hops too. It is going to be awesome. There's only one thing left to do, so 1, 2, you know what to do. Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the leaders and best, let's go blue. Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the champions of the West, go blue. All right, guys, next time you see me, we'll be drinking on the golf course. Go blue. What's up, Cold Break? We made it to the big house. We got the Hail Pale Ale on tap today. Let's try it out. Probably should have poured it in a clear cup because you see what it looks like. But when you're tailgating at the big house, today is my drinking day. Cheers. Go blue. Hey everybody. Wow, what an awesome day we had yesterday. Still recovering a little bit this morning here at home. That tailgate was incredible. Not only did we bring our Hail Pale Ale, but we also had a couple cocktails on tap with our other amazing cold break portable draft systems. And it was a widely successful event all around. Remember, we had a gallon left over? Well, I put it in a small keg, we carbonated it, and now we're right here down in the bowels of Outside the Box Brewing Company. And this is my kegerator. So I still got a gallon of this great beer left, even though we drank all of it at the tailgate yesterday. So let me pour a little bit here and show you what it looks like and describe to you what it tastes like. All right, there we go. So the biggest thing that the downfall of this beer obviously was the color. We talked about that with the using the extract syrup, the liquid malt extract. Made it a lot darker than what we wanted. And I added that caramel 60 as steeping grains. If I did that again, I wouldn't add that in because the liquid malt extract already has enough color in it. I use that caramel 60 when I brew an all grain batch on my big system. And it gives just a touch of color and a little character to it. But as you saw at the beginning of this series, that all grain version of Hail Pale Ale was a lot lighter. So let me bring this in. It's not horrible. Okay, it's definitely out of the range for style guidelines for the SRM, but it's all about the taste. The smell is great. You know, those dry hops gave a lot of citrus and piney flavors from the Citra and Amarillo. And the flavor is really, really great. Intense hop aroma, intense hop flavors. Those dry hops did exactly what I wanted them to do. It's borderline IPA range. So if you were entering this beer in a competition, you'd probably get knocked down a little bit for the color and maybe a touch for being too hop forward for a pale ale. But most people that love pale ales and IPAs, this is definitely crushable. Got a lot of great feedback yesterday at the tailgate. A lot of people love the beer. So we got a gallon left over. We're about ready now to go cheer on our Detroit Lions in their NFL game today. Michigan crushed it yesterday. Big blowout win at the Big House. Lots of great drinks, lots of great friends, lots of great food. It was an awesome day all around. So we got a little bit of this beer left. We're going to have a couple pints today while we watch the Lions. We're going to can up the rest of this so we have it in cans to share with others when we are going around and we don't have our draft systems with us. Matter of fact, hey, look what we have right here. We got a can of Hail Pale Ale, fresh off the canner. And there you go. All right, that's another one of my favorite things about homebrewing is not only can you be creative with your beer names and your recipes, but you can also play around with creating your own labels. So this is my U of M Hail Pale Ale label, and for every beer, I write my own special Surgeon General warning. So let me leave you with this. According to the Surgeon General, this beer is strictly prohibited in East Lansing, South Bend, and anywhere in the state of Ohio. This beer has been brewed specifically and solely for the leaders and best. Hail. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for sticking around with me on this pale ale brewing lesson and brewing day and brewing everything that is beer. Stick around. Please show up again, like, comment, and come back for another episode as we cheers to our cold ones. And who's ready for a cold one? I always am. Cheers, Cold Break. Yeah.
Let's go.